They say the cracks are always there before the collapse, you just don't see them until the light hits from the right angle. That angle, for me, was a single photo on a Monday morning. It was the day after the university's fall benefit gala. Kimberly had been on the planning committee for the third year in a row, which meant weeks of late-night Zoom calls, floral samples left around the house, and a running monologue about linen shortages and guest list drama. She loved it, the attention, the fuss, the chance to glide across a room like she owned it. I didn't. But I went like I always did. I'd just gotten back from a supplier conference in Houston. My body was still catching up from the time change and a missed connection through Denver. Honestly, I would have rather slept for 16 hours straight, but Kimberly was adamant. She wanted me there, her words. She said it meant something to her, especially this year. So I pulled on my black tux, ran a razor across my jaw, and smiled beside her like a man proud to be on her arm. It wasn't until the next morning, sitting in my home office with a lukewarm cup of coffee, that I saw it. I wasn't even looking for anything, just scrolling through Facebook *ling time before my first Zoom meeting. A local photographer had uploaded a batch of pictures from the gala. I clicked through out of habit, stopping on one that froze me mid-sip. There she was. Kimberly. In that deep green satin gown she tried on 3 times the week before, asking if it made her look too much. Her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the light. And beside her, a man I didn't know. Tall, maybe early 40s, good suit. Not one of the usual faculty donors or local business owners I recognized. His hand was on her waist, not resting gently but firmly like he belonged there. And Kimberly, she was smiling. Not the stiff, polite smile she uses for event photographers. This one was softer. Closer. Her eyes were turned slightly up toward him and her body angled inward like the photo had caught them in the middle of something private. My stomach sank. I stared at the image for a full minute, waiting for my brain to catch up. Maybe it was just a flattering angle. Maybe he was a cousin of someone on the board. Maybe I was just tired. Still, I saved the photo. That evening, I brought it up casually while we were doing dishes. She was rinsing out wine glasses and humming something from the jazz playlist we'd used during the benefit. I slid my phone across the counter. "Hey, who's this guy?" She didn't flinch. Didn't pause. Just glanced at the screen, then laughed, a light, airy laugh that felt practiced. "Oh, that's Alan. One of the out-of-town donors. He's on the board for some tech incubator." I only talked to him for like 2 seconds. I didn't even know we were being photographed. I nodded slowly. "Looks like you two were mid-conversation." "Well, yeah," she said, like it was obvious. "We were at a fundraiser. Everyone was talking to everyone. It's literally my job to schmooze." She rinsed another glass and handed it to me. I dried it slowly. "I don't think I've seen him at one of these before," I said. She shrugged. "You haven't? First time attending. Look, if you're trying to imply something." "I'm not," I said quickly. Too quickly. "Just curious. That's all." She gave me a smile. Not sweet. Not angry. Just controlled. "You're overthinking it, Josh. Trust me." I nodded again and the conversation moved on. But something inside me, something quiet and familiar, twisted. Not because I had proof. Not because I thought she was lying. But because, for the first time in 2 decades, I noticed how effortlessly she could make me doubt my own gut. Later that night, after she fell asleep reading her book on the chaise lounge, I pulled out my phone again. I looked at the photo. The way she leaned in. The way he touched her like he'd done it before. The detail in the corners, the blurry figures behind them, the flicker of candlelight on the white tablecloth. I tried to remember the moment it was taken. Had I been in the room? Across the ballroom? Laughing with the dean about his toast? I couldn't remember. The truth is, we'd grown comfortable. Our marriage had turned into a well-run system, 2 gears turning in sync. She ran the social circuits, I handled the business side. We traveled once a year, texted throughout the day, split chores down the middle. We had habits instead of rituals, routines instead of surprises. And I'd been fine with that. Or at least, I thought I was. But now, that photo burned in my head like an unanswered question. And I hated how easily I dismissed my own discomfort. Because the more I looked at it, the less harmless it felt. That night, I lay in bed beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. Her phone buzzed once on the nightstand. She didn't wake. I didn't look. But I thought about it. And that alone was new. I wish I could say I forgot about the photo. That after a few days, work got busy, life returned to normal, and whatever I saw or thought I saw slipped into the background like a bad dream. But I didn't forget. I couldn't. It followed me in subtle ways. Like when I reached for my keys one morning and saw her gym bag in the hallway sitting by the door at 6:45 a.m. like she'd been planning her exit since before sunrise. Or when I noticed her perfume, the one she used to only wear on date nights, became her new Pilates scent. She used to come back from class in baggy sweats and flushed cheeks. Lately, it was makeup perfectly intact and leggings that felt more like a statement than workout gear. Maybe that sounds petty. Maybe it is. But once doubt crept in, everything had a different color. I started seeing with fresh eyes. The gym schedule changed, for starters. Kimberly used to do a 6 p.m. Pilates class 2 blocks from the house. Now suddenly, she was driving 20 minutes out of the way to a special studio across town, one she said had better instructors, though she never mentioned their names. She'd leave after dinner, sometimes around 7:30, claiming she liked the later time slots. I'd hear the garage door rise, the car pull out. Sometimes she was gone for 2 hours. Other nights, 3. Once I texted her around 9:45 just to ask if she wanted anything from the store. She replied 5 minutes later, still in class. All good. Love you. That was the first time I checked the gym's website. There was no class listed after 8 p.m. Maybe it was a one-off, a special event. I tried to give her that. But the following week, it happened again. Same late departure. Same vague excuse. Same delayed response. I told myself I trusted her. And I did. At least, I used to. But something inside me was shifting quietly, steadily, like sand under a weakening structure. Then came the bank card. We'd always had a shared account and 2 linked cards. She used hers for groceries, occasional shopping trips, and her usual Target runs. One day I got a fraud alert from our bank asking if I recognized a charge at a boutique I didn't recognize. When I opened the account, it wasn't there. Because it hadn't come from our joint account. It came from a second card, a new one I hadn't known she'd opened. It wasn't hidden exactly, but she'd never mentioned it. And when I asked her about it later that night, she blinked like it caught her off guard. Oh, that, she said, like I'd asked about a stray sock. Yeah, I got one for the gala committee stuff. I was just tired of submitting reimbursement forms every week. I nodded slowly. But it's not in the foundation's name. Well, no, she said, already turning away. It's just easier this way. Less paperwork. She poured herself a glass of wine and moved on to another topic, something about the spring fundraiser, I think. But my ears were still ringing with the words just easier. It's strange how those little things pile up. A new perfume. A second credit card. A schedule that no longer lined up with her story. And then there was the phone. Kimberly had always been casual with her phone. Left it in the kitchen. Texted openly beside me. But now it followed her. Into the bathroom. Into the laundry room. Onto the porch for long, whispered calls that always ended before I stepped outside. The passcode changed. I noticed that one night when her screen lit up and she instinctively turned it face down. It used to be her birthday. Then it wasn't. She said it was just for security, a precaution because of all the spam texts going around. I said nothing. But something inside me braced. Then, one night in early November, I caught her standing in the kitchen, phone in hand, the screen lit up with a message thread. When I walked in, she jumped, actually flinched, and locked the screen so fast I didn't even catch a name. You scared me, she laughed, clutching her chest like I'd crept up behind her. Don't sneak up like that. I apologized, even though I hadn't been sneaking. I was just walking into my own kitchen. I thought you were asleep, she added, still clutching the phone. I was just checking the time. But she wasn't checking the time. She was mid-text. I'd seen her thumb hovering over the keyboard. And I wasn't supposed to see it. I felt something tighten in my chest, something unfamiliar and deeply unwelcome. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling. I didn't ask her who she was texting. I didn't ask why she'd flinched. I didn't ask what time Pilates ended on Thursdays. But I thought about asking. I thought about it so hard that my jaw ached from clenching it. Instead, I started paying attention. Not obsessively. Not like a maniac digging through trash. Just sharper. More focused. She got a haircut I hadn't heard her mention. It was shorter, sleeker, less like her usual style and more like something out of a fashion spread. She started wearing new jewelry. Subtle pieces. Dainty bracelets and a necklace I hadn't seen before. I complimented her. Of course I did. Looks great, I said, as she slid a gold pendant over her collarbone one morning. New. She smiled. Yeah. Just a little treat for myself. I nodded and sipped my coffee, watching her gather her things. She left with a kiss on my cheek. It was the kind of kiss you give a friend. Light, quick, thoughtless. The door closed behind her, and I sat there in silence, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. That's when I realized how quiet our mornings had become. We used to talk, really talk. Now it was just headlines and errands. She used to ask about my day. Lately, it felt like she already knew the answers. Like her mind was elsewhere. I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid husband. The one who loses his mind over a cologne sample or a change in lipstick. But there's a difference between being insecure and being aware. And I was aware now in a way I hadn't been in years. One evening, I got home a little earlier than expected. My last meeting was canceled and I didn't text her that I was on the way. I figured I'd surprise her. Maybe take her out. Maybe try to break whatever spell we'd been under lately. Her car was in the driveway. The house was quiet. As I stepped inside, I heard the sound of water running upstairs. I walked up slowly, listening. Music drifted from the master bathroom, her Bluetooth speaker playing something jazzy and slow. I stopped at the door, about to knock, when I heard her laugh. Not just a giggle. A full-bodied laugh. Warm and unguarded. And then something else. A voice. A man's voice. It was muffled. Faint. But it was there. I stood frozen. My hand hovered above the doorknob, my breath caught in my chest. The running water. The laughter. The two silhouettes blurred through the frosted glass. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. I backed away, slowly, carefully, like a man avoiding a live wire. I left the house without her hearing me. I drove around the block twice. Parked down the street. Sat in the dark, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the dashboard clock as the minutes crawled by. When I finally drove home, the lights were off. The music had stopped. The water was silent. Kimberly was downstairs, barefoot, sipping wine and watching something on Netflix like nothing had happened. She looked up, surprised. "Hey, I thought you had a late meeting." "Got canceled," I said, hanging up my coat. She smiled. "Well, lucky me." And just like that, she was back in character. Warm. Effortless. Untouchable. I said nothing. I poured myself a drink and sat beside her, nodding along to the show. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I had seen enough. I returned home on a Thursday. I wasn't supposed to be back until Friday evening. The original plan had me out of town for 3 days, client meetings, site visits, a networking dinner I wasn't particularly excited about. But the last meeting got canceled last minute and I decided to surprise Kimberly. I didn't tell her. Didn't text. Didn't call. I figured I'd just walk through the door with takeout from her favorite Thai place and pretend, just for one night, that things were the way they used to be. I pulled into the driveway just after 7:30 p.m. The garage door was already closed, but her car was inside. That struck me first. Kimberly almost never parked in the garage if she knew I'd be home soon. She hated the shuffle of cars in the morning. Still, I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she didn't expect me. Of course she didn't. I hadn't told her I was coming. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel. I don't know why. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the strange stillness of the house. The windows were dark. No TV flickering. No lights glowing from the kitchen or bedroom. If she were home, why would she be sitting in the dark? Something felt off. Not in a dramatic movie scene way. Just subtly wrong. Like a puzzle piece that almost fit, but not quite. I stepped out of the car and unlocked the door to the house. Inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. Even the air felt still, like the rooms were holding their breath. I set the takeout bag down on the kitchen counter. No sign of Kimberly downstairs. No shoes by the door. No glass of wine on the table. I glanced around, listening. Then I heard it. Water running. And music. It was faint but steady, coming from upstairs. From our master bathroom. I moved slowly, the way you do when you're not sure if you're welcome in your own home. Halfway up the stairs, I heard her voice. Laughter. Light and warm. Not the forced kind she gave me at dinner. Not the polite, public laugh she used at fundraisers. This was different. Softer. Unfiltered. And then, a second voice. A man's. It was low, amused. Playful, almost. My heart started pounding, but my body stayed calm. I walked the rest of the way like I'd done it 1,000 times. Like it was any other night. The bedroom door was ajar. The bathroom door was almost closed, but not quite. Through the narrow sliver, I could see steam rising above the frosted shower glass. A wine glass sat on the vanity counter. A man's jacket, definitely not mine, was draped over the chair we never used. Inside the shower, I could just make out 2 figures. Kimberly, her hair piled into a messy bun, laughing with her head tilted back under the water. And him sitting on the closed toilet seat, fully clothed, wine in hand, talking to her like they were in their own world. Neither of them saw me. Neither of them had any idea I was even in the house. I didn't say a word. I didn't push the door open or shout or make a sound. Instead, I turned around and walked back into the bedroom. I pulled open the drawer on my side of the bed, the one she always said looked like a disaster zone. I pulled out a white envelope I'd prepared 3 days earlier. I didn't want to need it. I didn't think I'd use it. But I had prepared it just in case. Because when you start doubting everything, you start planning for things you once thought were impossible. Inside the envelope were 3 items. First, a printout of a credit card statement, hers, not mine, with the boutique charges, the hotel bar, and the high-end restaurant receipts from nights she claimed to be working late. Second, a stack of photographs. I hadn't taken them. I'd hired someone quietly through a referral. The photos weren't graphic. They didn't need to be. A man picking her up outside her Pilates class. The 2 of them laughing over wine at a rooftop bar. Kimberly touching his arm as they stood too close near the valet stand. You didn't have to be a genius to fill in the blanks. And third, divorce papers. Clean. Direct. No drama in the language. Just the facts. Prepared by my attorney, signed by me, ready for delivery. I placed the envelope on her pillow. It sat there like a loaded G***N. Then I walked downstairs, picked up the Thai food I never got to serve, and quietly left the house. I didn't slam the door. I didn't make a scene. Outside, the air was cold. Sharp. It felt real in a way I hadn't felt in months. I sat in my car for a long time. Didn't drive. Just sat. My phone buzzed once in the cup holder, probably a calendar alert. Then again. And again. I didn't look. I drove back to the small rental I'd quietly signed the lease for 2 weeks ago. Just in case. By the time I got there, my phone had 12 missed calls. By midnight, 63. By morning, 324. Texts. Voicemails. Emails. Please call me. I can explain. Where are you? Joshua, this isn't what you think. But I knew exactly what it was. It was betrayal. Not some dramatic, drunken one-night stand. Not a mistake she immediately regretted. It was comfort. Repetition. Familiarity. It was a pattern she'd built right under my nose and decorated with Pilates classes and late-night committee meetings. I didn't respond. She didn't deserve a reaction. What she did deserve was the truth delivered as precisely as the choices she'd made to get there. The next morning, I got a message from her sister. Are you okay? Kimberly's worried sick. She says you vanished. I replied with a single text. I'm safe. Please let her know the envelope on the bed has all the answers she's looking for. I didn't say anything else. That evening, one of our mutual friends called me confused. Kimberly had started spinning a version of events, something about a misunderstanding. About me being paranoid. About how I'd left in the middle of a fight. She never mentioned the man. The wine. The shower. I didn't bother correcting her. Because truth has a way of catching up. And when it does, it doesn't knock. It walks through the front door and leaves everything burning behind it. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into every account we shared: bank, mortgage, insurance, business. I updated passwords. Enabled 2-factor authentication. Downloaded statements. Marked all the logins. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet and started listing every financial decision Kimberly had made without me. The boutique bank card. The new gym membership she paid for separately. The Uber trips to addresses I'd never seen. I wasn't hunting for revenge. I wasn't trying to trap her. I was documenting the truth line by line. The house we'd built together was already on fire. I was just gathering what was worth saving. By the time the weekend came, she still hadn't stopped calling. I blocked the number. And then I slept. For the first time in months, I slept all the way through the night. No dreams. No guilt. Just silence. The thing no one tells you about betrayal is that the loudest part comes first: the crack, the collapse, the chaos, and then, if you're lucky, there's a strange kind of quiet. That's where I lived for the next few weeks. In the quiet. Not forgiveness. Not healing. Just stillness. I moved into a 2-bedroom rental at the edge of town. It was small, dated, and smelled faintly like the previous tenant's cologne. But it was mine. No shared drawers. No lingering perfume on the pillowcases. No emotional landmines hidden in the furniture. I didn't tell anyone where I was, not at first. The people who needed to know knew. My lawyer. My assistant. My accountant. That was it. Kimberly called. Of course she did. The first few days it was frantic. Please, let's talk. It's not what you think. Come home. Then the tone shifted. She started getting clever. You're acting unstable. You need help. I'm worried about you. She even messaged my sister, my cousin in Vermont, and our old neighbor from 3 houses ago, spreading a quiet little whisper campaign that something must be wrong with me. That I'd just snapped. I didn't respond. To anyone. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much to let my emotions speak for me. I'd spent 2 decades building a life with her, and I wasn't about to burn it all down in some fit of rage. That wasn't who I was. Instead, I got to work. I started by locking everything down. Every email, every login, every shared cloud account. We'd gotten comfortable over the years, too comfortable. There were folders she could still access. Accounts we hadn't touched in months. I reset everything, enabled 2-factor authentication on every profile that mattered, and transferred ownership of digital assets I'd been lazy about protecting. Next came the finances. I met with my accountant at a coffee shop downtown, one of those old brick buildings that smelled like dark roast and baked scones. I laid everything out on the table. Not just the infidelity. The financial movements. The second card. The questionable withdrawals. He didn't say much at first. Just took notes. Then he said, "You're smart to act now. The longer you wait, the more complicated this gets." I nodded. That's why I'm here. Together, we created a spreadsheet of everything we could verify: savings, investments, real estate, accounts with dual signatures, accounts she'd opened in her name only. He flagged anything unusual. I took *TS. Every dollar mattered now, not because of spite, but because clarity had to come before closure. Then came the lawyer. Sarah Kaplan. Sharp. Direct. No time for theatrics. I liked her immediately. "This is going to be clean if we keep it quiet," she said after our second meeting. "But if she pushes back, we'll be ready. You've got the paper trail. You've got the grounds. What we need now is documentation, dates, and a timeline." "I already started," I said, handing her a folder. Inside were labeled tabs: evidence, financial activity, correspondence, independent accounts, legal notices. I had printed everything. She flipped through it and nodded slowly. "Joshua," she said, "you've done more prep work than most people do in 6 months." I gave a tired smile. "I'm not looking for revenge. I just want the truth on paper." She gave me a look I didn't expect. A kind of professional respect. "This is going to work in your favor." From there, things moved fast. We filed the initial paperwork, formally separating assets. I kept the business. The house was on hold. Everything else was up for negotiation, but Sarah made it clear, based on what we have, you're in a strong position. Just don't engage with her outside of legal communication. No texts. No calls. No emotional detours. Understood. Meanwhile, I focused on my business. I shifted some of the ownership from our joint trust into a personal holding company, perfectly legal, perfectly timed. I didn't hide it. I documented everything, signed off on every move, logged every approval. I wasn't trying to screw her over. I just didn't want her hands on the things I had built before she ever said, "I do." That night I read. I hadn't read like that in years. Not business articles or political updates, but books, actual books. I reread The Old Man and the Sea and A Man Called Ove. Stories about loneliness, pride, resilience. They felt different now. Heavier. More personal. I started walking too. Just after sunrise. 5 miles every morning, earbuds in, podcasts or silence, depending on the mood. There was something cleansing about the cold air and wet leaves and empty sidewalks. I'd pass the same golden retriever and his elderly owner each day. We never spoke. Just a nod. It became a ritual I didn't know I needed. The strangest part was how free I felt. Not happy. Not yet. But free. There was no pretending anymore. No tightrope walking. No deciphering smiles at the dinner table. No late-night lies tucked between Pilates classes and donor meetings. I was alone. And that meant I could finally think. One afternoon, I got an email from Kimberly's friend, someone I barely knew, but she had my personal address somehow. "Just wanted you to know," it read, "Kimberly's been saying you're having a breakdown." I didn't believe it, but I thought you should be aware. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "I appreciate the heads up. I'm not having a breakdown. I'm having a breakthrough." That was the only message I sent. From what I could gather, Kimberly was telling everyone that I'd simply disappeared. That I left in the middle of the night. That I'd become distant and paranoid. She said I was overworked. Depressed. Maybe even unstable. It was all theater. But the thing about a stage is sooner or later the curtain falls. Her story began to unravel in small ways. The man from the shower or whoever he was stopped showing up. She stopped mentioning him entirely. Maybe he got spooked. Maybe he realized he wasn't the only one in the story anymore. Or maybe she'd lied to him too. One of our old friends, Lisa, sent me a text out of the blue. Kim's acting strange. Says you ghosted her. But something feels off. I just replied, I'm fine. Taking time for myself. I never said a word about the affair. I never exposed the photos. I didn't send mass texts or Facebook posts or warnings. I didn't need to, because truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. It just waits, patiently, quietly, until the room goes still. Then it speaks. Kimberly kept trying to bait me. Emotional messages. Phone calls from blocked numbers. One afternoon, she sent a long email detailing how she'd been confused and misguided. That she still loved me. That she wanted to talk, just once. I forwarded it to Sarah. She replied within 10 minutes, we'll include it in the case notes. Do not respond. So I didn't. Instead, I poured myself a drink, lit the fireplace in my little rental, and watched the flames until the glass was empty. I thought I'd feel broken by now. Crushed. But instead, I felt like a man slowly rebuilding his house after the storm. Not stronger, exactly, but more aware of where the weak spots were. There was one final thing I did that week. I went to the safe. Inside was a sealed envelope, a handwritten letter Kimberly gave me on our 10th anniversary. She called it her "if we ever drift" letter. Said it was for emergencies. Said it would remind us of why we worked. I opened it. It was full of promises. How we'd never lie to each other. How we'd never let someone else take priority. How we'd fight for our marriage even on the hard days. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back inside, and wrote one line on the front. I fought. Alone. Then I closed the safe. And walked away. By the start of December, Kimberly had changed tactics. Gone were the emotional voicemails, the late-night emails laced with tears and guilt. Now she was calm, careful. Calculated. She started painting a picture. A version of events where I was the one who snapped. Where I was the one who walked out unannounced without explanation. Where I was having a midlife spiral, as she told our mutual friends. She said I'd grown distant. That I'd become paranoid, erratic, cold. That one day I was home and the next I was gone. No word. No goodbye. Just vanished. It was a smart move if I'm being honest. We'd been married 21 years. I'd always been the quiet one. Private. Reserved. I kept my frustrations folded tightly inside. Kimberly, on the other hand, was warm, social, outwardly affectionate. People liked her. Believed her. So when she started telling the story, her version, it stuck. The first hint came from a voicemail left by one of our longtime friends, Dan. Hey man, just checking in. Kim says you're taking some time off. That thing's got intense. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. I didn't reply. A few days later, I got a card in the mail from Kimberly's cousin, someone I'd only ever seen at weddings and funerals. Hope you're healing from whatever you're going through. We're all rooting for you to come home soon. There it was. Whatever you're going through. I sat at my desk, staring at the handwriting, my jaw tight. It didn't matter that I had documentation. It didn't matter that I had evidence. Because I hadn't told anyone. I'd kept it quiet. Clean. On purpose. But now she was writing the script and I was cast as the unstable husband who abandoned his marriage for no apparent reason. She even reached out to one of my clients. That was the final straw. I'd been working with a nonprofit out of Boston, long-term project, very public. Kimberly had met the director once, briefly. Yet somehow she managed to get his number and called him directly. Said she was concerned about my well-being. That she was unsure if I was in a position to handle the pressures of ongoing contracts. He called me right after. His voice was cautious but kind. Josh, everything okay? Yeah, I said. Why? Your wife, well, she called. Said some things. What kind of things? That you'd left home. That you were burned out. That she wasn't sure you were mentally fit to keep taking on work. I felt a white heat rush to my face. Not anger, clarity. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to control the narrative. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath and said, You've known me 5 years. Have I ever missed a deadline? Delivered late? Slipped in performance? He was quiet a second, then said, No, never. Then trust what you've seen, not what you've heard. That was all I needed to say. He paused again. Got it. I hung up and forwarded the incident to Sarah, my lawyer. She responded with a single sentence. She's laying groundwork. Don't engage. So I didn't. Not publicly. Not emotionally. Instead, I let the silence speak for me. Whenever someone reached out, I offered calm, direct answers. I've stepped away for personal reasons. I'm doing well. Thanks for checking in. That's it. No mention of affairs. No mention of betrayal. No mudslinging. Because I knew something she didn't. When you stop trying to control how people see you, and just start being who you are, things have a way of revealing themselves. And they did. The first crack in her story came from her friend Vanessa. We weren't close, but she'd always been kind to me at parties. The kind of woman who noticed things, even when she didn't speak on them. She sent me a message on Facebook one evening. "Hi Joshua. I know this is probably out of the blue, but I wanted you to hear this from someone neutral. Kimberly's telling people you had a breakdown, that you ghosted her. But I've seen her lately. She's not acting like someone abandoned. She's acting like someone who got caught." I read the message twice. Then she added, "I'm not trying to stir things. Just thought you should know some of us can tell the difference." It hit harder than I expected. Not because I needed validation, but because it meant the cracks were finally showing. Her story was collapsing under the weight of its own falsehood. That week, more messages came. Some subtle, curious check-ins from old colleagues. Some bold texts from friends who outright asked, "Is it true what she's saying?" Each time I replied with the same tone. "Not exactly. I've chosen not to speak about it right now. But thank you for asking." It drove her mad. The silence. The restraint. Because the one thing Kimberly didn't anticipate was how much power there is in saying nothing. When you don't fight back publicly, people lean in closer. They start watching more carefully, noticing what's being said and, more importantly, what's not. She couldn't keep the story straight for long. One version had me depressed. Another had me cheating. A third had me leaving because I couldn't handle her success. None of it added up, especially not when I quietly kept working, delivering projects, attending board meetings, volunteering at a local shelter on weekends. The man she described didn't match the man people saw in real life. And the man in her story, the other man, the one from the shower, was nowhere to be found. It's funny how quickly they disappear, isn't it? Whatever romance she thought she had with him, it fizzled. Maybe he realized he was a prop in someone else's unraveling marriage. Maybe he never expected consequences. But by mid-December, he was gone. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that he'd quietly moved to another department. Something about a restructuring. Classic. Kimberly never mentioned him again. Not once. It was as if he'd never existed. I imagine she thought erasing him would make the problem disappear. That if she deleted the evidence, rewrote the memory, reframed the story, she could restore control. But truth doesn't care about your version of events. It lives on its own terms. One evening, while organizing documents for the divorce, I came across a note she'd written me 3 years ago. It had been tucked inside a holiday card. "You're the calm in every storm. I'm lucky to be loved by someone who knows how to stand still when the world goes sideways." I stared at the handwriting. There was no sadness, no longing, just irony. Because in the end, that's exactly what I'd become. The calm in her storm. The stillness that made her chaos louder. She had tried to spin it all, my silence, my absence, my refusal to play along, as weakness. But it wasn't weakness. It was discipline. And it was working. One final thing happened before the end of the year. She tried to reset the narrative again, this time with our adult children. And that would prove to be her biggest mistake yet. Kimberly tried one last card, our kids. She called them home over winter break, claiming I had abandoned the family. Said I was having a crisis. But I'd already spoken to them. I never fed them lies, just told them I needed space and they'd understand in time. They arrived skeptical. And after 2 days with their mother watching her dodge questions, flinch at simple details, they called me. "Dad, my daughter said, we know. You don't have to explain." She already did. That same week, my lawyer delivered the full divorce documentation. No anger. Just facts. Infidelity. Deception. Quietly laid out in black and white. 4 months later, I moved north to a small coastal town. I bought a house near the harbor and started volunteering at the local archive, restoring fragile documents. The pain didn't vanish, it settled, filed away like old records. Kimberly became a closed chapter. I chose dignity over spectacle. Silence over spite. And in doing so, I reclaimed something I hadn't felt in years myself. There's peace in stillness. And I finally understood what freedom really felt like.